Good morning, Vivers. It is Wednesday, March 19th, and that means we are getting our mid-month update for the Saros patch. And that comes with not the biggest update we've seen, but what they're saying are some pretty significant changes here. And so in this video, my goal is to not just show you what all these changes are, but show you what they mean. We'll start with a quick summary through everything, and then I'll go through everything in detail and show any relevant stuff in the practice tool. All right, so starting off with a quick summary, we basically have a boss clarity increase quite a bit where all the bosses are going to be coming in on meteors now. They're going to come in at the start of every night except for night 3. It's going to take 45 seconds to land, so it should be a lot more sort of like visual clarity around what you're playing for and when bosses are coming in. In addition to that, you're going to be able to basically last hit bosses now. So similar to the way like in League you can like steal Baron Nashor with the last hit, that same kind of idea is applied where you no longer have to like run up and hit the pedestal to get the soul. Now whoever lands the killing blow is going to get the soul, which is pretty cool. And then even more juice on top of that, if you do get the killing blow, it's going to instantly respawn all your allies in addition to dropping an extra orb of life and mobile respawn beacon. So kind of crazy upping the ante of trying to snipe bosses. Resurgence was touched a bit with the revival timers being increased by 5 seconds across the board. We have this very interesting kind of global change to ability haste and dash haste where they're getting split out. So right now if you look at your abilities, like your shift and your any of your other abilities are both abilities. So if you built ability haste like on a tech blade, it would give you not only cooldown on your abilities, but also cooldown on your mobility, your shift, since that is an ability. So now what they're doing is splitting those apart. So you'll have like basically dash haste and you'll have ability haste. And ability haste won't apply to your dash, and dash haste won't apply to your abilities. And the dash haste is generally going to come with quick blade with like move speed. So we'll get more into the details of that. We also have this really nice change to air dash speed where they had added this little friction multiplier that is now gone. So the air dash is back to the normal feel good kind of max distance velocity. Really big mana rework that we're going to get into the details of. But the biggest thing you got to know here is that our base mana regen went way up, like almost 8x up. But in order to activate that, you have to wait for 4 seconds. So the biggest difference you're going to feel here is you have like a mana gate in combat where whatever your max mana is, like that's basically the amount of abilities you can like put out at one time, and you have to basically not cast an ability for 4 seconds to let it regen. You can still LMB. You just have to wait to use an ability for 4 seconds to start that regen, and then you'll regen back very quickly. So as long as you kind of understand how it's working here, it's going to feel more like energy or stamina and a little less like mana. And they're trying to make it basically more like a global resource. And then certain hunters that have mana sort of integrated into their kit, we have these hunter specific changes related to mana that we'll go over. And then coming down to hunter balance, says Ghost, a little strong. I've always thought Ghost is a little strong, but I like it. But his Omnivamp on that new passive got brought down to 6% per stack instead of 8% per stack. I don't think that's going to slow him down much. He's still going to be very strong. Felix level 1 Ignite is now lethal. Another Beebo buff, which kind of amazes me, but the bomb got nerfed a little bit, barely. Like its max health got, I mean, it got hit pretty significantly at early levels. So we can see 600 off of the first level, but coming up to the max level bomb, only 200 off the health. So the bomb health is reduced. That's a nerf. All this stuff is a buff. So the RMB got touched pretty good to where it should be significantly more fun to use at least. And then this is a big one for Saros. You actually have to hit hunters with the RMB to get the mana back. You can't just hit monsters. So that's going to be a big difference for Saros players compared to like kind of what you've been used to. Really cool new Ricochet shot power that we'll take a look at where your LMB sort of bounces. And then we have clarity added to the base camp recaller where there's going to be a visual now when someone's recalling it. And then random things they failed to document. And that's it for this patch. So like we said, like not a super long one, but quite a few sort of big important things. The mana rework, the air dash speed, the ability dash haste separation, this boss stuff. Like these changes are going to have pretty big impact. There's just not a ton of them. So now let's take a look at the notes in detail and really try to understand everything that's going on. So I'm going to just kind of read you this intro because it's relevant. Hello, Supervivors, and welcome back to another patch. This one might seem small in word count, but each line means a lot, so read everything. All of it. Thematically, I'd like to say our orientation is toward making the game and combat state of SUPERVIVE more intuitive, action-oriented, and appreciable. this is just one step toward that goal in our next patch, the launch of Arc 2, which is going to be beginning in April, guys. So every arc is 3 months, and then basically every month is kind of a new content patch with a new hunter. That's kind of the cycle they're following so far. So like first 3 months of this year, we got Beebo, Krista, Saros, and that's Arc 1, 90 days basically. And then coming into Arc 2 here, we're going to have a new hunter at the beginning of April, and then we should expect another 3 months each with a new hunter up to Act 3, right? But they say this should feel like a significant evolution for SUPERVIVE, so stay tuned. Also, a fireside chat, those really cool videos with Jess Nam where she kind of gives us some insight into what's going on. That will be coming next patch as well to talk about where they're at and where they're going. And they ask and they're thanking us for our patience on that. So I really love those videos. So really excited to see kind of what Jess has to say in a couple weeks. But digging right into it here, we have bosses signaling and spawning. So it says, currently bosses are easy to miss for a variety of reasons. We want to make them more consistent in delivery, ceremony, and timing to see if it helps you plan and strategize around them. Basically, we want you to always know and be thinking about when bosses will arrive, where bosses will land, and how to stay informed of a boss's location and health so you can contest them. So sort of to the visual clarity thing, all bosses now ride into the world on meteors and have an updated schedule. So the schedule kind of being here. At the start of a night, meteors launch and take 45 seconds to land. So bosses will be landing 45 seconds after the start of night. So your little timer right here, as soon as it turns to night, you can basically, know that in 45 seconds into that timer is when the bosses are landing. And on night 1, there's going to be 3 bosses that land, 2 with exotics and 1 with a legendary. And this is up from 2, and it looks like this third one will have a set spawn point. And then on night 2, 45 seconds in, meteor beasts are going to be dropping, which are the things that drop the souls for the game. So there are going to be 2 of these that basically drop at the same time. And this is right around kind of the mid game where these are going to be, looked at and contested. Night 3 are going to be no bosses. And then night 4 coming into endgame is basically going to be the endgame boss, which drop powerful endgame buffs or items. So endgame boss map icon now shows which one it is. So it's like visually clear which one you're actually trying to go after and contest. And the spawn rate adjusted to 100%, meaning there's no longer a chance that it doesn't come in. I guess there was a 10% chance before that it just doesn't spawn. Now it's basically going to be there every game. And then it also says the meteor mechanism now additionally projects where they will spawn on the map, so you don't need to guess / infer where they'll be. Like before, remember when you like opened the map, you could like see them coming in, but you kind of don't really know where they're going to land or whatever. Like it should be more visually clear now, kind of where they're going to be ending up and like where you're going to have to play off of. And then what I think is even a cooler change to this kind of visual clarity is this acquisition stealing. So they say philosophically, I'd say we prefer more action-oriented plays like securing the last hit on a monster to claim a buff versus standing around mashing F on a pedestal. So basically changing the interaction when you kill a boss to, instead of running up and like interacting with the loot to get it, you just have to get the very last hit on the boss, the killing blow basically, and this is going to be what sort of secures you the kill. And in the case of the meteor boss, the souls, this is what's going to give you the soul. And so we see whoever lands the killing blow on meteor boss gets the soul instantly for their team. And whoever lands the killing blow on endgame bosses also gets all the rewards automatically placed into their inventory. If inventory is full, it goes on the ground because you clearly didn't want it. Lol. And then this is probably the biggest one. Landing the killing blow on Soul Warden instantly respawns all your dead allies, in addition to dropping an extra orb of life, which if you're holding it will auto-res you if you go down, and a mobile respawn beacon, which is, in your inventory here that you can place anywhere on the map to respawn your entire team. So sniping the killing blow has a significant amount of rewards attached to it, specifically around resurrecting you and your team. And so if you're the last player left, potentially playing around a Soul Warden snipe instead of like a crown kill can do basically the same thing, bringing all your allies back on top of giving you some extra juice with an orb of life and a respawn beacon. So actually, even more valuable than a crown proc, because you're getting, I don't know if you're getting the XP that you get from a crown proc, but you're getting this orb of life and mobile respawn beacon as well. All right, and then coming down to revival mechanics, it says we're trying to clean up early team fights so they're less clowny without pushing revival timers too far. And so we see revival timers increase by 5 seconds. So this is just kind of across the board, making resurgence reses happen slightly less often. And, most people would generally say that's probably a good thing. I will say that I think now that we see the ranked and unranked queues getting split out next week with the announcement we saw last week, where come the beginning of April, with the next patch in 2 weeks, we're going to see the queues moving to trios, and with that, the addition of a ranked and an unranked separation of queues. I think we might actually see Resurgence turned off for ranked and on for unranked. And I think that would be a really cool change and solution to Resurgence, because this has been one of like the most hotly contested mechanics that has been added since they added it, and it's very like polarizing, whether people like it or not. And so it's made for newer players. That's literally why it was put it in the intent. So I think it belongs more in a setting like an unranked match of SUPERVIVE, less in a setting like a ranked match of SUPERVIVE. So even with this change, we might actually see, who knows, I'm kind of just guessing here based on how things have been going. We might see a removal of Resurgence on the ranked queue. And if we don't see that, it might be something worth pushing for as a community, because I think something like that makes a lot of sense. All right, coming down to combat, this is pretty big. So this is basically a rework of ability haste. So this whole time in SUPERVIVE, ability haste has applied to all of our abilities, including our dash. And so basically what's happening now is if your dash, as well as any hunters that have an ult that's a dash, so think like Beebo, Tonk, or like Bishop, those have dashes built into it. So those will also work off of your dash haste instead of off of your ability haste. So think anything that gives you mobility that's an ability is now going to be under this dash haste stat, and it's not going to, the cooldown is not going to be reduced by ability haste. And so the reasoning for that is right here. Ability haste is just too strong in SUPERVIVE, specifically because anyone who stacks it gets high uptime on their abilities and lots of extra mobility because their dash is also an ability. Makes sense. This makes ability haste a must-take on a lot of hunters. And we see that with many hunters building double tech, even LMB focused ones who should be inclined to chase movement speed. So now we're asking that you trade something for ability spam versus incredible dash mobility, and giving more value to keep leveling up your boots early. So what that means is ability haste reduces all cooldowns is now just going to reduce ability cooldowns. So for example, on Saros, if I build a tech blade, it's going to scale the cooldown of my Q and my R, but it is not going to scale the cooldown of my shift. What is going to scale the cooldown of my shift is actually going to be Quick Blade now. And we can see not only does Quick Blade give me move speed, it also gives me 10% dash haste. So Quick Blade has now become, more clearly the mobility option for items, where, this and the evolutions of this are going to give you, not only better move speed on the ground, but also more mobility in the dash, kind of, centralizing more around the movement side of things, whereas a tech blade is just going to be giving ability haste. It's only going to be working, on the abilities that are not dashes. And so there's this kind of very big, separation in stats to understand now. And we can see that designated in the bottom right here. The 20% with the clock is my ability haste. The 10% with the boots is my dash haste, right? We can see here that the tech blade and tech helmet base ability haste has been increased by 5% from 15 to 20. And then we get plus 1% per tier in addition as well from what it used to be. So the base ability power on the tech blade's bigger, and we're going to get a little more scaling as we bring it up than before to kind of make up for what we've lost. So now that our dash is split out, we're actually going to be able to get more cooldown reduction on our normal abilities if we're still building double tech and we don't care about the dash CDR. The Quick Blade and Bladed Helmet stats have also been adjusted to sort of account for this. So Quick Blade has been changed from 30 move speed plus 2 a level to 15 move speed plus 1 a level. So essentially like a halving of the move speed on the Quick Blade to account for the dash. And, we can see that right here. The dash haste has essentially been added as the new stat, and it's going to increase with 1% per level as we scale our Quick Blade. We also have this boot base stat increase. So 5 move speed plus 6 a level has been changed to 5 move speed plus 10 a level. So every time you upgrade your boots, you're going to get 4 more move speed than before. And also, it looks like you're going to be getting an extra 2% dash haste per level. So it's actually going to be significantly much more worth leveling your boots now, it seems like. We can see, yeah, so see, as you start to level your boots, we start to get this dash haste on there. And I think that might be a tooltip error because it says 3% dash haste, but we can see it's only giving me 2, and it says it should only give me 2 in the tooltip here. And then coming down to air dash speed, I really like this change. They basically just, this was something they added that, in my opinion, these kind of changes just make the game feel clunky. Like after you've already established kind of a baseline for movement and how fast stuff is moving, when you put a dampener on something, just like what they did a few adjustments ago when they were changing all the mobility stuff, they put this friction dampener. So basically, you're only going to be traveling, you're going to be going 15% slower when you air dash because they added this little friction thing in. They've essentially taken that away. So it says, in our effort to pull mobility back and make it more appreciable, we've nerfed air dashing, that is jumping and using a dash, in a number of ways to make it less of a yeet and more of a dash. Now, with ability haste, dash haste separation introduced to reduce mobility overall, we think we can revert one nerf that felt the worst. And yeah, so basically they're just removing this erroneous friction that they added to the air dash, so it's going to be back to 1.0. It's been on 0.85 for the last couple weeks or whenever they made that change, and now it's going to be back at the normal 1.0. So everyone's going to have their normal kind of air dash momentum back. The air dashing should feel back to that normal kind of high pace, like high speed yeeting, as it were. Mana Rework, this is big, and I'm just gonna basically read you guys this summary because there's a lot they're trying to say here. So it says, oh, mana. We've gotten a lot of feedback on mana through the years, like, how come some hunters seem to need mana while others don't? Or more directly, why does it exist? Just to answer that, for the current state of things, mana may not be the most well-implemented stat in SUPERVIVE, but it does add some build diversity for a few hunters and is generally unoffensive. For like a lot of the hunters I like to play, like Myth, Ghost, range DPS hunters, Mana Blade has basically been essential. Like if you want to spam your abilities, you just get a Mana Blade, turn it into Mind Blade, and kind of forget about it. A lot of hunters don't even need that though, and they can just get away with doing basically the same thing without a Mana Blade. Yeah, it's basically just this like hunter specific thing, and it seems like one of these things where you kind of get it and forget about it. That said, we know that mana can be a lot more interesting as a stat, and if done right, could feel like a universally valuable option stat rather than a per hunter required one. So with this patch, we're trying a new version of mana that might feel closer to energy or stamina. So this is going to feel a little less like traditional mana and more like energy and stamina. Your abilities use mana to cast per usual, but your mana regen is halted for 4 seconds after spending any mana. So this is the big kicker here. There is now a 4-second rule in SUPERVIVE. If you've ever played a caster in WoW Classic or used mana in World of Warcraft Classic, this same rule applies, except it's a 5-second rule. So think like you're a mage in WoW Classic, and basically you're using your abilities, which are using mana, right? As soon as you're in a position where you need to recharge or you're out of mana, basically what you're going to do is you're going to have to not use an ability for 4 seconds, and then it kicks in big. Remember, it's up like, our base mana regen is up like over 8 times what it normally is. So we can see we go back, and that's like without Saros' passive or anything. We go back to full very quickly, but what that requires is not using any abilities, including not using a dash, right? And that's going to be the biggest thing, is in the heat of combat when you're running and stuff, if you do dash, oh, it's because Saros abilities doesn't use mana. Hold on. So going to a normal hunter where stuff actually costs mana. So like on Ghost, if we're like using our mana, we're like using all our abilities and stuff, and we basically have to wait 4 seconds, but we can still LMB. So like Ghost is like a really good example of it, because you can still be kind of spraying your LMB and getting the mana back. You just have to wait 4 seconds after you do that, after you dash, and after you Q. And the biggest one for like mid-combat situations is going to be the dash, because if you're kind of trading and having to dash, that's going to be the thing that resets the 4 seconds and stops your cooldown. So like in a situation where you've already been trading a bunch, and you're kind of low on mana, that could maybe screw you if you're like looking to regen and you have to dash something. It kind of stops it again. But it's just like the most important thing to pay attention to is that timing, where you can still be LMBing, you can still be moving, you can still be using powers. You can use any ability that doesn't cost mana, like we saw for Saros, where he can still shift, because his shift doesn't cost mana. The only thing in his kit that costs mana is the R&B. So these changes are actually going to be like kind of a buff for Saros, because the only thing he has that uses mana is the LMB. So if he just doesn't LMB for 4 seconds, he's good. He can do everything else and get the same regen through as other hunters. And so, like, more than anyone, I think this change is going to be very beneficial for Saros. And he can also, just like everyone, still LMB while it's regenning. So, yeah, just overall very interesting kind of mana rework change. And coming back to this, we've also significantly boosted everyone's mana regen, provided they haven't used an ability in the last 4 seconds, which we just looked at, and removed mana regen from items. So now you can no longer scale your mana regen off of like building mana items, and also decrease the max mana stat in general. So it says, zooming out, the way we think about it is we want mana to be a short-term resource that gates you on the total number of actions you can take per fight rotation. And then you'll need to find moments to regenerate, rather than being a long-term resource that you occasionally have to manage by going back to a base camp or chugging a million brews. You can now also build max mana as a stat to increase your total ability cast in a fight, but not to the point where you're ignoring mana forever. This shouldn't feel very restrictive. If anything, it may be too generous, but let's start here. So basically, max mana is down, regen from items is gone, but there's big inherent passive regen after 4 seconds. And we can see base mana regen increased from 1.5 to 11 per second. That's like 8 times this would be like 12. So it's a little less than 8 times kind of the amount of mana regen we were getting before. And then bonus mana regen per level increased significantly from 0 to an extra 2.6. And so at 15, we're going to be getting, you know, another over 30 more on top of that. And here's kind of the result of this. At level 1, it takes 12 seconds to fully regenerate your mana. At level 15, it takes 6 seconds. Previously, it was 1.5 to 3.5 minutes. So the base regen was way slower before. But basically, that comes with the removal of the stat on items, as well as the lowering of the max mana stat. So mana regen is paused for 4 seconds after spending any mana. And this is the key, spending any mana. So I think basically the rule here is just like WoW Classic, right? As long as you don't cast something that spends mana, that regen is going to continue. So you can still, you know, LMB, you can still do anything that's free. Like on Saros, you can do literally everything except the RMB, because none of it costs mana, and you're still going to be getting that regen through. So we can see here that the mana on equipment has basically been changed, where the base value is down 50, so like reduced by a third, and then the amount you're gaining per level is down by the same, like a third, and then the regen is just completely removed, no mana regen anymore. And then taking a look at how these mana changes affect specific hunters, based on, you know, how their kit was already interacting with mana, we see some changes to Zeph. Mana recovery on landing Windslinger, the LMB, reduced from 20 to 10, so halved on players, and it was already halved from that on monsters, so that's halved as well. So 10 for hitting players now, 5 for hitting monsters. Mending Breeze, mana cost reduced, so that's actually a big reduction on the RMB mana cost, so you're going to be able to get more of those out per rotation, basically. And then same thing with Vortex Charm, so base value on Vortex Charm down 10, like 25% right there. Aluna's mana recovery from landing her LMB hits is basically halved, so it's going to be down from 20 and 10 with the empowered unempowered state, down to 10 for the empowered state, 5 for the unempowered state. Krista has mana recovery on landing the reverberation passive reduced by halves, so from 30 down to 15. The RMB mana cost has been reduced though, so it's going to cost a third less, from 30 down to 20. And then Nuclearite Salvo, their ultimate, mana cost reduced as well, down from 60 to 50. Finally, looking at Brawl, we can see Adaptive Strike RMB mana cost reduced by 5. The Flame Step left shift mana cost reduced by 5, and the Face Still Chain mana cost reduced by 5. So just kind of some overarching mana changes hitting some of the hunters that this apparently is affecting the most, and very likely we're going to see more of these hunter-specific mana changes, guys. So if you're playing any hunters that are feeling specifically bad with these mana changes, like shouting out to like the kingpins out there, who I saw some really initial negative feedback from with these mana changes when we did the trios playtest last week. Just give your feedback to Theorygraph, right? Like if you're a kingpin and this feels like crap, that's because Kingpin needs some special hunter-specific touches here. So just make sure whatever hunter you're on, kind of give your feedback to TC on how the mana is feeling with them now, especially if it's something specific to how you like to build, how you like to play, etc. All right, coming down to hunter balance, there's not a ton going on here. We basically have Ghost, Felix, Beebo, Saros, and there's not like a crazy amount going on with any of them. So for Ghost, it just says Lil Strong, and it says Omnivamp bonus reduced from 8 to 6. So this is the new ghost passive that was added just 2 weeks ago. And so now instead of the dash reset, which everyone gets automatically now, he is going to get the Omni Vamp after landing a non-LMB ability, and it's 3.5 seconds, and this can sort of infinitely stack if he keeps connecting non-LMB abilities. This can and it'll reset the timer every time he hits it. So as long as he can hit ability every 3.5 seconds, you can basically keep stacking this up. And I guess the 8% was feeling a little too strong there, so it has been turned down to 6% on the vamp you're getting after connecting. Connect a nade, vamp for 3.5 seconds, connect a laser, extra vamp for 3.5 seconds, do a couple of those in a row, and you're stacking the 6 to 12, then to 18, then to 24. And so, kind of giving Ghost, and especially if you're like maxing R&B or you're maxing Q, there are certain situations where the initial or the cooldown reductions you're getting on this level 4 or on this level 4 can feed you to sort of continue stacking this up. So I really like this new Ghost passive. I think it feeds a lot better into his kit than how the previous one did, especially with the dash changes. Taking a look at our Fox buddy Felix, basically there's always been this thing where the level 1 ignite couldn't kill. Now it's going to be able to kill. So it's now lethal, and the trade-off is the level 1 and 2 dot duration has been reduced almost by half, from 5.25 seconds down to 3. So it's not going to tick for as long, but it can actually kill now. So if you're fighting against Fox and you get out with 1 HP and that ignites on you, you're going to die this time. All right, coming down to Beebo, there's a long paragraph about the bomb being sentient or whatever. He kind of lost me a while ago on that, I'm not going to lie. Basically what we see here is they're trying to give a little more counterplay to like the bomb bat holding like a one shot. And so we see it's a really drastic health reduction at level 1, like 600 off. But as you continue to level the bomb up, so it's been the same before, it was always 1600. So as you continue to level it up, it will scale. And once you have, if you go to level 4 bomb, it's only 200 health less. So it's not a crazy amount less if you're fully leveling it. And even if you take it to 3, it's still only, 350 or so less. So definitely a reduction. If you're an enemy playing against a Beebo, you should be able to kill his bomb more reliably, especially earlier on when it has less health. But just kind of keep in mind the bomb is a little squishier. And the trade-offs for that is they're buffing the R&B like crazy. Which they keep buffing Beebo. I don't know if he's ever needed it, but he continues to get stronger. So R&B damage increased by 25%. The level 2 upgrade now giving 25% extra damage. The level 3 upgrade now giving 50% off the cooldown, which was what the level 4 upgrade did. And now the level 4 upgrade cycles ammo 40% faster. So basically having it be less of a machine gun and more of like a you can like choose your option, right? Because before, if you were playing R&B Beebo, you kind of had to spam it like this for it to be effective. And we can see we can still spam it like this. However, I swear the Super Zeep is less than or is more than 1%, bro. It seems so much more. So here's the mana thing. We can still bat. We get all our mana back pretty quickly. But now, if we hold the R&B with it fully maxed, we get the way faster cycling. So this is like going to be, the R&B max is going to be more for like a little, more skill expressive Beebo, where if you're looking to cycle, and this has a determined order, right? It's always the same order. So if you kind of know the order of this rotation and where you're at, you can very reliably get the Zeep you want pretty quickly now, like max, like 1.5 seconds to get from like 1 Zeep all the way back around. So, I think it's going to open up a lot of new play styles or like new options for Beebos that really like to play more around the R&B and less around kind of like the bomb combo, but both are going to be incredibly strong. So if you're good, at playing around the bomb threaten and you're still playing R&B max, I think this combo, is going to actually be really dirty now, especially with them being able to like more predictably throw the exact type of Zeep they want, right? And then finally, the heal Zeep makes a tree if it's not collected. So if you throw it, well, it has to actually hit something, it looks like. So it didn't happen right there. But if we hit a wall with it and no one grabs it by the time this timer runs out, it'll turn into a tree. And remember, we can do a freaking like Kingpin slam with trees with our bat, right? All right, and then finally coming back to Saros, Saros no longer gains mana back from hitting monsters with the R&B, just hunters. So this is kind of a big deal for Saros, but it's with what we were talking about before with the overall mana changes. Like this isn't really going to matter for him because his literal only ability that costs mana is the R&B. And so before, when you hit creeps with this, it would give you mana back. We can see it's not going to do that anymore, but it's not going to affect us that much because if we're using this on creeps, all we have to do to be instantly back at full mana, like we can use all of our abilities, we can even proc our passive like that. But even if we didn't proc our passive, we just waited a few seconds without using the R&B, we're going to be back to full off the new regen because our Q doesn't cost mana, our R doesn't cost mana, and our shift doesn't cost mana. The only thing Saros has that costs mana is the held R&B. And so while, you know, this change matters a little bit to him, it's not going to matter too much because he's still going to be able to have a lot of combat prowess while benefiting from the normal, you know, regen that's happening right here, just that we're getting with these mana changes, right? So Saros, you know, going to be in a very good spot based off kind of how these mana changes are working. We have a brand new power, which sounds really cool. I don't know if it's a little buggy or if it needs to be players, but I was just trying to test it in practice tool and I can't get it to proc. But it might be because there's nothing in here that is counted as players, but we can look at the tooltip and kind of read it. It's basically hitting LMB attacks spawn a homing ricochet projectile that bounces to nearby enemies up to 6 times. The ricochet projectile deals 35% of the damage dealt by the LMB attack, with a minimum of 7 damage up to a cap of 175 damage. So basically, the more powerful your LMB is, the more value you're going to get out of this ricochet shot. So for example, a fully charged Myth LMB is likely going to get sort of max value out of this power, the damage on it at least, right? Each subsequent ricochet bounce deals 10% less damage. Ricochets that re-hit enemies deal 75% less damage. All ricochets target a random nearby enemy, but their target selection is weighted towards enemies that have not been hit by a ricochet and towards enemy hunters over enemy minions. So going to be a very strong power for hunters that are using, that have heavily weighted LMBs. So like Shrike, Myth, you know, these hunters that have big damage LMBs are kind of get like really good value out of the damage bounce from this because it scales off of 35% damage of that LMB attack. Whereas on the other side of things, someone like Ghost might get sort of like the minimum value out of this. They're going to get some damage, but it's going to be significantly less because like one little Ghost shot of his LMB is significantly less damage than like, you know, a fully charged Myth LMB. Thus, the 35% is going to be a lot less, and so the value of this bounce is going to do a lot less damage if everything is working as the tooltip says here. All right, and then last couple things here, we have some added clarity around the base camp recaller, so you can actually see it when it's getting recalled to you now, which is a cool thing. And then things that forgot to get documented, added final boss icons, and Hudson's dash now properly resets on kill. Apparently it wasn't before. And that is it for the March 18th patch notes. So some pretty interesting things coming through. Like they said, not a ton of changes, but some pretty big ones. The ones that are coming through, the big mana rework, the kind of big separation of ability and dashed haste, and then this kind of boss visibility combined with the ability to actually steal like snipe bosses. Some pretty interesting changes, and I think, you know, this is all lining up for the implementation of trios. So we saw this. If you did the trios playtest this last week, this stuff was in there, so I got to play with this stuff a little bit. And then I think there is going to be another trios playtest this week. So if you're interested in trying trios before it goes live in 2 weeks, like keep an eye on the Discord, grab that playtest interested role. That'll let you know. You'll get the ping when they post about this next trios playtest, and they usually do that only like a day before. So expect something like later this week probably, and expect it just the day before, and then hopefully you can get in that window, try it out for yourself, give your feedback. But they basically said they were going to do one more trios playtest before the full release. So that'll either be this week or next week. Keep an eye out, but we can all be looking forward to an early April, beginning of Arc 2, new Hunter, trios, probably a bunch more changes coming through. So, and then I've heard some crazy stuff coming after that over the next few months. So we got a couple crazy months of SUPERVIVE lined up for us. It's going to be hype. Hope you guys are excited as I am, and just buckle up for the journey, I think. with that, I just want to thank you so much for watching. Remember to take care of yourself and keep vibing. Catch you in the next one. Peace.